Most people have no idea how powerful $150,000 truly is. They think you need millions to change your life. They believe wealth only begins when the numbers get huge. They assume $150,000 is nothing more than a stepping stone. But Charlie Munger understood what most people never realize. $150,000 is the moment where your life stops being fragile. It's where real leverage begins. It's where options open. It's the threshold that separates surviving from building. But here's the brutal truth. Most people will reach $150,000 at some point in their life and completely waste it. They won't recognize its power. They won't respect it. They won't use it strategically. They'll treat it emotionally. They'll inflate their lifestyle. They'll upgrade everything. They'll chase pleasure instead of opportunity. They'll sabotage the one moment where their financial life could have changed forever. Because $150,000 doesn't just represent money. It represents stability, safety, and the ability to finally shift from survival mode into investment mode. At $150,000, compounding becomes real. Momentum becomes real. Long-term planning becomes real. Your future stops depending on luck and starts depending on discipline. But only if you don't blow it. Only if you don't behave like the people Munger warned about. Most people fail not because they can't reach $150,000, but because they can't keep it. They sabotage it with ego, impulsiveness, emotional spending, and poor decisions. They mistake comfort for progress and excitement for success. They let their feelings destroy their future. In this video, I'm going to show you why $150,000 is the turning point most people overlook, and exactly why they waste the opportunity that could change their life forever. Before we begin, make sure you subscribe. What you're about to learn might save the next decade of your life. The moment someone reaches $150,000, something fundamental changes in their financial life. They may not even feel it happening, but it's happening. At $150,000, the ground beneath you stabilizes. The fear that once dictated your decisions begins to fade. You stop living paycheck to paycheck. Emergencies no longer feel catastrophic. You can finally breathe. You can finally think. You can finally plan. But most people never reach this stage consciously. And because they don't recognize the shift, they destroy it before it has time to transform their life. The psychological power of $150,000 is deeper than people realize. It's the moment where your financial identity is tested. Because when you have nothing, discipline is forced upon you. When you have something, discipline becomes optional. And this is where the majority fail. They don't know how to behave when they finally have room to breathe. They confuse relief with success. They confuse access with achievement. They confuse stability with abundance. This is exactly why the majority blow the opportunity that could have changed everything. Let me ask you something honestly. Do you think you would handle $150,000 with discipline or with emotion? Another reason $150,000 is so transformative is because it creates leverage. With $150,000, your investments start compounding in a way you can actually feel. Your returns begin to matter. Your future begins accelerating. Time starts working with you instead of against you. At this stage, every good habit multiplies faster and every bad habit destroys more. The stakes are higher not because the number is huge, but because the potential is. People underestimate how powerful compounding becomes after this threshold. And so, they waste it through short-term decisions without understanding the cost. The tragedy is simple. Most people hit $150,000 by accident, not by intention. They reach it after years of grinding, surviving, or saving a little here and there. But because they never developed the identity required to maintain it, they fall right back into the habits that kept them broke. Their spending increases. Their lifestyle inflates. Their ego grows. They stop saving aggressively. They stop being intentional. Their discipline evaporates. They return to survival mode voluntarily. Let me ask you something real. If you gained $150,000 today, would your first reaction be to build with it or to celebrate it? The next reason people blow this opportunity is emotional spending. At $150,000, people feel safe enough to indulge more. They reward themselves prematurely. They justify purchases with phrases like, "I earned it," or "Life is short." They treat $150,000 like money to enjoy instead of money to leverage. And as a result, they spend away their momentum. They turn a turning point into a trap. Emotional spending is one of the fastest ways to erase the leverage that $150,000 provides. Munger warned that the inability to manage emotions is more destructive than financial ignorance. Another problem is the false sense of security. $150,000 gives people just enough comfort to relax. But wealth is not built through relaxation. Wealth is built through discipline during comfort. When people feel secure, they stop the habits that got them there. They slow down. They reduce their strategy. They start believing the hard part is over. But $150,000 is not the finish line. It's the starting line. The beginning of actual momentum. Yet most people treat it like they've already won. Let me ask you something honestly. When you achieve something, do you build on it or do you relax? Another reason $150,000 changes. Everything is the psychological shift it creates in how you view opportunity. Before $150,000, opportunities feel too risky. After $150,000, opportunities feel possible. But this is where people make the wrong choices. They start chasing high-risk investments. They chase quick gains. They fall for scams. They trust their emotions more than strategy. They let excitement override intelligence. They confuse activity with progress. Instead of using $150,000 to multiply slowly and safely, they use it to gamble. And gambling destroys more futures than being broke ever did. People also blow their opportunity because they don't upgrade their financial identity. You cannot maintain or grow $150,000 with the mindset of someone who once had nothing. Your identity must evolve. Your standards must rise. Your self-control must strengthen. Your vision must expand. But most people keep the same identity, the same habits, and the same emotional responses they had when they were struggling. They expect different outcomes with the same behaviors, and they wonder why progress slips away. Let me ask you something real. Are you ready to become the kind of person who deserves $150,000, or just someone who hopes to receive it? Another destructive pattern is lifestyle inflation. People upgrade everything at once. New car, new apartment, new wardrobe, new gadgets, new experiences. They stretch their life to match their income instead of using their income to improve their life. This is why most people who hit $150,000 feel just as stressed as when they had nothing. Because they convert opportunity into obligation. They exchange freedom for comfort, and they commit to expenses that drain the future they haven't built yet. Another reason people blow $150,000 is because they don't have a long-term strategy. They don't know how to use it. They don't know where it should go. They don't understand the leverage it creates. They don't have a plan, so the money drifts out of their hands. Without a strategy, even good moments turn into wasted potential. You cannot maximize momentum without direction. Let me ask you something honest. If I gave you $150,000 right now, do you actually know exactly what you'd do with it? Finally, $150,000 is a psychological mirror. It reveals who you truly are. When you reach this level, your habits become amplified. If you are disciplined, $150,000 grows. If you are impulsive, $150,000 disappears. If you think long-term, $150,000 becomes a foundation for freedom. If you think short-term, it becomes a fire you burn through. Money exposes identity. it doesn't change it. And that is why most people blow the moment that could have changed everything. In the next block, I'll show you the deeper psychological traps behind blowing $150,000 and why most people are not mentally prepared to handle the leverage that this stage of wealth brings. As I dug deeper into why most people waste the $150,000 that could change their life, I realized that the issue isn't financial literacy, math, or opportunity. It's psychology. Most people aren't mentally prepared to reach $150,000, much less manage it. Their identity hasn't evolved. Their habits haven't matured. Their standards haven't risen. When money arrives before the mindset required to handle it, destruction follows. And that's exactly why $150,000 slips through the hands of those who need it most. One of the biggest psychological traps is the shift from scarcity to comfort. People spend their entire lives in scarcity mode, operating under fear, discipline, and limited resources. When $150,000 arrives, it removes that fear, but not the mindset. The scarcity-based version of them still exists, but now they have money to express their impulses. The same emotional decisions they used to make with $50 now get made with $5,000. The same inconsistencies that once cost them a little now cost them everything. Let me ask you something honestly. Do you trust your impulses with bigger numbers? Another reason people blow $150,000 is because they misunderstand what the money represents. $150,000 is not fun money, reward money, or finally breathe money. It is foundation money. It is the seed that grows everything else. But most people treat it like a finish line instead of a starting line. They start checking off the lifestyle upgrades they've been daydreaming about during the years they struggled. They see $150,000 as permission instead of responsibility. They think they've earned the right to relax. But wealth responds to behavior, not entitlement. The next psychological trap comes from emotional compensation. When people finally hit $150,000, it triggers a desire to make up for years of stress, pressure, and sacrifice. They begin compensating emotionally for past struggle. They justify spending as self-care, healing, or celebration. They want to treat themselves because they deserve it. And while reward isn't inherently bad, emotional compensation is a direct sabotage of the momentum $150,000 provides. Munger warned that the inability to detach emotions from money is a lifelong financial curse. Let me ask you something real. When you reward yourself, do you do it from discipline or from pent-up emotional exhaustion? Another major psychological issue is ego inflation. Money amplifies identity. When people reach $150,000, they suddenly feel smarter, more capable, and more confident than they actually are. They begin to overestimate their abilities and underestimate risks. They start believing they can time markets, predict trends, or outsmart systems. They take on investments they don't understand. They chase opportunities that feel exciting instead of strategic. Ego turns $150,000 from an asset into a liability. Confidence built on discipline is powerful. Confidence built on sudden financial relief is dangerous. Another psychological pattern that destroys $150,000 is lifestyle identity shift. People start identifying with a more expensive version of themselves. They adopt new tastes, new standards, and new expectations without realizing the long-term cost. They begin chasing the feeling of finally living, but that feeling becomes expensive fast. They start upgrading things that don't need upgrading. They feel pressured to maintain an image that drains their future. And once lifestyle inflation begins, it almost never goes back down. Let me ask you something. If your income stopped today, could you sustain the lifestyle you've built? Another issue is the lack of boundaries. People who reach $150,000 often expand their spending because they don't have strict financial rules. They operate emotionally instead of structurally. They don't track. They don't audit. They don't plan. They don't protect. And when behavior is unstructured, money disappears. $150,000 requires boundaries, fixed percentages, clear rules, automated investing, capped spending. But most people never build these boundaries, so their money slowly leaks away until momentum is gone. Another destructive psychological pattern is urgency addiction. When people have lived their entire lives under financial pressure, their nervous system becomes addicted to chaos. Calm feels unnatural. Financial stability feels foreign. So subconsciously, they recreate the conditions they're familiar with. They overspend. They overcommit. They make reckless choices. They break their own momentum just to return to the emotional environment they understand: stress. It sounds irrational, but people self-sabotage because chaos feels familiar. They don't know how to live without pressure. Let me ask you something honestly. Do you create problems in your life when things finally start going well? Another reason $150,000 gets destroyed is because people confuse activity with progress. They feel pressure to do something with the money. So instead of creating a long-term plan, they chase quick wins. They invest impulsively. They follow hype. They seek shortcuts. They get caught in speculation, not strategy. They imitate what others are doing instead of thinking independently, a mistake Munger warned about repeatedly. Another issue is that people fail to change their environment. They continue surrounding themselves with people who have small habits, small discipline, small vision, and big impulsiveness. They stay connected to influences that normalize poor decisions. And instead of rising to the level of their future, they fall back to the level of their surroundings. Momentum requires alignment. But most people hit $150,000 and still live, think, and behave like everyone around them. Let me ask you something. Do the people around you help you grow, or do they drain your progress? Another deep psychological trap is the lack of a long-term identity. Most people think about the next few months, not the next 10 years. So when $150,000 arrives, they think short-term, they think comfort, they think gratification. They don't think legacy, stability, or compounding. They fail to understand that $150,000 is not about the present, it's about the next 20 years. Without a long-term identity, they will always make short-term choices. Another lethal habit is the belief that more money will fix their problems. But $150,000 simply exposes the problems they already had. Poor habits get bigger, emotional spending becomes more destructive. Lack of planning becomes devastating. A weak identity collapses under new pressure. Money is not the solution. Money is the amplifier. Let me ask you something real. If your life doubled financially, would your habits sustain the growth or accelerate the damage? Finally, most people blow $150,000 because they don't understand leverage. $150,000 isn't money. It's the ability to build systems. It's time, freedom, optionality, strategic advantage. But people use it like a toy instead of a tool. They use it to escape discipline instead of reinforcing it. They use it to feel wealthy instead of becoming wealthy. And that is why $150,000 changes everything. But most people blow it. In the next block, I will explain exactly how to build the mindset, structure, and discipline that allow $150,000 to grow into real wealth instead of disappearing the moment you touch it. The deeper I explored why people waste the $150,000 that could change their entire future, the more I realized that the problem is not the money itself, it's the identity behind the money. When $150,000 arrives in the hands of someone whose mindset was shaped by scarcity, stress, and survival, the money becomes fuel for the same patterns that kept them stuck for years. Instead of elevating their life, it amplifies their weaknesses. Instead of giving them leverage, it exposes their lack of structure. Instead of creating freedom, it accelerates their self-destruction. One of the biggest reasons people blow $150,000 is because they confuse financial relief with financial transformation. Relief is temporary. Transformation is permanent. Relief gives you comfort. Transformation gives you freedom. When people finally reach $150,000, They feel relief for the first time. But relief tricks them. It makes them feel like they've made it, when in reality, they've only reached the first checkpoint. Relief lowers defenses. It weakens discipline. It opens the door to impulsive behavior. Let me ask you something honestly. When you feel relief, do you usually tighten your discipline or loosen it? Another psychological root behind blowing $150,000 is the lack of emotional intelligence. Most people have never been taught how to manage their emotions. So when money arrives, they project those emotions directly onto their financial decisions. Stress becomes spending. Insecurity becomes upgrading. Boredom becomes impulsiveness. Fear becomes hesitation. Ego becomes risk-taking. Money becomes a mirror for emotional instability. Without emotional intelligence, $150,000 becomes gasoline thrown on unmanaged feelings. This emotional instability is also why people treat money as therapy. They try to buy back the self-confidence they never developed. They try to buy the lifestyle they envied for years. They try to buy status to hide their insecurity. They try to buy comfort to avoid discomfort. But money cannot fix psychological wounds. It only covers them temporarily. And the more someone tries to fill emotional voids with financial decisions, the faster their $150,000 disappears. Let me ask you something real. When you spend money, are you trying to solve a problem or escape a feeling? Another reason people blow $150,000 is because their habits never improved, they simply became more expensive. Without discipline, $150,000 is nothing more than oxygen for old habits. If you used to overspend, now you overspend more. If you used to avoid planning, now you avoid it with higher stakes. If you used to chase pleasure, now you chase bigger pleasures. People assume their habits will magically rise when their income rises. But habits don't rise. Habits repeat. And repetition is stronger than intention. Another major root is the absence of internal standards. People with low standards tolerate behaviors that destroy their future. They tolerate inconsistency. They tolerate emotional decisions. They tolerate chaos. They tolerate distractions. They tolerate excuses. And because they tolerate these things, their future never rises. Money doesn't raise your standards. You do. If $150,000 lands in the hands of someone with weak standards, the money declines to match them. Let me ask you something honestly. Are your standards high enough for the future you want? Another psychological reason people waste $150,000 is lack of long-term vision. Most people don't think 10 years ahead. They think 10 minutes ahead. Their decisions are driven by impulse, not strategy. They chase small pleasure at the cost of massive opportunity. They want to feel good now instead of being free later. Without long-term vision, money becomes a tool for instant gratification instead of generational advantage. This is why Munger emphasized inverting your thinking, looking at decisions through the lens of the future, not the present. Short-term thinkers burn their momentum. Long-term thinkers multiply it. Another destructive pattern is the dependence on external validation. People want to look successful more than they want to be successful. They buy the car, the clothes, the apartment, the lifestyle, all to impress others. They allow the expectations of people who don't care about them to dictate the decisions that shape their life. But validation-based spending is a bottomless pit. You always need more. You always chase more. And eventually, you drain yourself financially, trying to maintain an image that brings you nothing. Let me ask you something real. Do you spend money for yourself or for the approval of others? Another psychological reason people blow $150,000 is the fear of responsibility. Money brings responsibility. Responsibility brings pressure. Pressure brings discomfort. Many people don't want that responsibility because it forces them to confront their habits, their weaknesses, and their lack of structure. It forces them to make intentional decisions. And intentional decisions are uncomfortable for those who are used to drifting. So instead, They unconsciously sabotage the money to avoid the responsibility that comes with it. They feel safer with less because less demands less from them. Another major root is identity inertia. People remain loyal to outdated versions of themselves. They cling to habits, environments, and beliefs that no longer serve them. They keep old routines alive, even when those routines built a life they no longer want. They refuse to evolve internally, so externally, nothing changes. When $150,000 arrives, they behave like the person they used to be, not the person they should become. And eventually, the money disappears because it doesn't align with their identity. Let me ask you something honestly. Are you fighting to keep your old identity alive at the cost of your future? Another reason people waste $150,000 is because they lack structure. Without structure, discipline becomes random, effort becomes inconsistent, money becomes chaotic. A structured person knows where every dollar goes, what every decision means, and how every action compounds. An unstructured person moves through life, reacting instead of planning, and reactive behavior destroys momentum. Finally, the deepest psychological cause of blowing $150,000 is the belief that money is the solution. People think money solves the problem, but money only amplifies the problem. If you lack discipline, money reveals it. If you lack planning, money exposes it. If you lack boundaries, money breaks them. If you lack identity, money confuses it. The truth is that $150,000 doesn't change you, it reveals you. In the next block, I'm going to show you how to break every single one of these patterns, rebuild your identity from the ground up, and develop the psychological framework required to turn $150,000 into long-term wealth instead of watching it disappear. Now that you understand the psychological traps that cause people to destroy the one opportunity that could change their life, it's time to talk about the transformation that must happen if you want to protect your $150,000. Multiply it and turn it into real wealth. You cannot approach $150,000 with the same mindset you had when you had $0. You cannot operate with the same habits, the same environment, or the same identity. If you try to rise without evolving, you will collapse under the weight of your own potential. $150,000 reveals who you are, but it can also redefine who you become if you let it. The first step to transformation is identity elevation. You must become the kind of person who deserves $150,000. Not just receives it, but deserves it. The kind of person who protects momentum, not destroys it. The kind of person who thinks long-term, not short-term. The kind of person who understands compounding, not consumption. Money responds to identity. When your identity rises, your financial life rises with it. When your identity stays the same, your money returns to match it. Let me ask you something honestly. Have you built the identity required for the future you say you want? The second step is installing non-negotiable standards. You must raise the minimum level of behavior you tolerate from yourself. Your standards must become higher than your feelings. It doesn't matter if you're tired, you follow the plan. It doesn't matter if you're tempted, you stay disciplined. It doesn't matter if you're stressed, you stick to your strategy. People blow $150,000 because their standards collapse under emotion. To protect your future, your standards must be stronger than your emotional impulses. Standards also remove ambiguity. When you know exactly what you expect from yourself, your decisions become clear. You stop negotiating with your weaknesses. You stop entertaining excuses. You stop drifting into old habits. Your new standards become the filter that determines your lifestyle, your environment, and your actions. Let me ask you something real. What standards in your life are too low for the person you want to become? The third step is mastering self-regulation. If you cannot regulate your emotions, impulses, or reactions, no amount of money will save you. Emotional intelligence is the foundation of wealth because money magnifies everything you feel. If fear controls you, you will waste opportunities. If ego controls you, you will take reckless risks. If insecurity controls you, you will overspend. If boredom controls you, you will sabotage your momentum. Money requires a calm mind, a disciplined heart, and a stable identity. Emotional regulation means learning how to sit with discomfort without escaping into spending. It means developing the ability to pause before reacting. It means learning to choose logic over impulse. When you master self-regulation, you gain the ability to handle more responsibility, more opportunity, and more momentum. Let me ask you something honestly. Are your emotions serving your future or sabotaging it? The fourth step is building an environment that supports your evolution. Your environment influences your habits more than your willpower does. If you surround yourself with people who prioritize comfort, chaos, and consumption, you will fall into the same patterns. If you surround yourself with people who focus on discipline, growth, and long-term thinking, you will naturally rise. Environment is a silent architect. It shapes your future without asking for your permission. You must redesign your life to match your goals. Remove triggers that lead to impulsiveness. Reduce exposures to people who drain your momentum. Increase your exposure to people, places, and routines that reinforce discipline. You cannot create a millionaire future in an environment that normalizes mediocrity. Let me ask you something real. Does your environment reflect the life you want or the life you're trying to escape? The fifth step is building structure. Structure protects you from yourself. It eliminates uncertainty. It reduces emotional decisions. It allows momentum to grow uninterrupted. You need a structure for spending, saving, investing, learning, planning, and improving. Structure is discipline made automatic. Structure turns your goals into routines. Structure turns your identity into consistency. Without structure, $150,000 becomes unstable. With structure, $150,000 becomes a foundation. Another reason structure is powerful is because it removes decision fatigue. When you know what to do, you don't waste energy deciding. You simply execute. And execution compounds over time. The sixth step is shifting from consumer thinking to builder thinking. Consumers ask, "What can I buy?" Builders ask, "What can I build?" Consumers chase entertainment. Builders chase leverage. Consumers look for pleasure. Builders look for opportunity. At $150,000, your mindset must shift from consumption to creation. You must start thinking like someone who builds assets, not expenses. Someone who builds stability, not chaos. Someone who creates momentum, not destroys it. Let me ask you something honestly. Are your financial decisions building something or just buying something? The seventh step is adopting long-term thinking. $150,000 can become $500K, $1M, or more. But only if you think in decades, not in days. Long-term thinking changes everything about how you behave. It makes you patient. It makes you strategic. It makes you resistant to impulsiveness. It increases your discipline. It strengthens your identity. When you think long-term, you stop chasing small pleasures and start building massive results. You begin to understand that the future isn't something you wait for, it's something you shape through your habits today. The eighth step is turning discipline into identity. Discipline is not something you do occasionally. Discipline is something you become. It's not a task. It's a form of self-respect. When you see discipline as identity, you stop breaking your own promises. You stop negotiating with weakness. You stop choosing comfort over progress. You begin making decisions that protect your future, not your feelings. This shift is where wealth truly begins. Let me ask you something real. Do you see discipline as a burden or as the cost of becoming who you want to be? The final step is full commitment. No hesitation. No half effort. No waiting for the right moment. You must decide that your future matters more than your excuses, more than your impulses, and more than your comfort. When you commit completely, your behavior changes instantly. Your standards rise. Your environment shifts, your identity strengthens, and the $150,000 that once would have been wasted becomes the greatest turning point of your life. People don't blow $150,000 because they lack intelligence. They blow it because they lack alignment. Identity, standards, environment, structure, and discipline. When these things align, $150,000 multiplies. When they don't, $150,000 disappears. So, here's the truth. $150,000 can change everything. But only if you change first. Let me ask you one final question. Are you willing to become the person who can turn $150,000 into real wealth? If you want more dark finance insights, more psychological lessons, and more guidance inspired by Charlie Munger, make sure you subscribe to this channel and leave a like on this video. Your future self will look back at today as the moment everything changed.